All right, day 59. We are moving right along. I'm Tom Lynch back, and this is 365 Days Towards Racial Change. We are exploring issues of black life in America, white life as well, and how those two communities interact and get along or not. We're looking at this focus, trying to educate ourselves and get to a point of some sustained economic power here in America, more so than the symbols and passing laws and building statues and legislation and debates and all the foolishness that blacks fall for. We need rights, land, and resources. We need unfettered access to America's vast table of resources and wealth. We're seeing the whole system benefit a more focused group of billionaires and billionaires and billionaires, and I feel like it's going to be top heavy, and it's got to come crashing down someday. Blacks have to kind of get some education, mostly financial, I'm finding. As I move along with this material through this year, I'm finding financial education, and I feel empowered. I know how to hold on to my dollars better. I know why I'm holding on to my dollars. I know who is impacted when I don't spend my dollars, things like that. So, we'll get into it, I'm sure, at some point as the year progresses, but understanding the Federal Reserve, international banking, what banks do with our money when we deposit it. Like, just for instance, did you know the banks, they take 90% of what you deposit and lend it to other people and other institutions. By law, they hold on to 10%. Of course, you have access. And that's why they do funny things with, they want some notice if you're going to close your account, and because they need to make it liquid. As long as it's digitized and out there in the cloud, they can manipulate it. But only 10% of what you deposit in banks are liquid. The rest of the 90%, they're loaning out, they're giving you their little interest and stuff. Nothing but like what they're getting. And God forbid you come to that bank and ask for a loan, right? Okay, we're not even talking about that today. But I'm starting to really dive into some of that education. Very important. Most of our information is going to come from a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He's written 3 excellent books. I start the program normally with his works. I think every program here at 365 Days Towards Racial Change. First book I read was A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We are referencing this resource today, looking at a question. Every once in a while we'll look at a question and stuff. Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and his national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. These works are more than a decade old, yet the information is always going to be relevant as long as blacks find themselves marginalized and struggling in this overarching white society. 2 questions or 2 veins of thought I try to tease out from this community is the first question has 2 parts, or the first idea has 2 parts. First part is, does the black mindset from slavery get passed down from generation to generations? Are blacks still living as slaves in America in type and kind? We can always sure come and go almost freely as we choose, but because of marginalization, we're still confined on where to put our dollars, where to put our energy, how we succeed in business, how we're treated in the workplace, ad infinitum. Second part of that question is, does white entitlement get passed down from generation to generation? Are whites living so privileged and entitled because it's just what is taught, what is intuited in the white family home? So I want people to think critically about those two facets of that first question. The second question, or the second idea is, I want blacks to play the economic game properly in the United States. We need that economic, financial education. We get everything but that. And as I grow in my knowledge of what money is, how it's conjured up out of thin air and all this stuff, I feel myself emboldened and more empowered in my economic position in America. I can't wait to get more into some of those topics. But that's partially Dr. Anderson's primary motivation as well, to see blacks succeed and compete economically with whites, Arabs, Asians, Hispanics, Cambodians, Vietnamese, any immigrating group coming into America. Blacks just are not on that same footing. Now, just so it's not all factual humdrum here at 365 Days Towards Racial Change, we take some fictional snapshots of slave life in America, try to bring it up into today's world. We look at Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, Uncle Tom's Cabinets, a work that has influenced theater, black stigmas and stereotypes, white stigmas and stereotypes in America. We'll check in on old Tom and see how he's doing. Right now, we just finished chapter 6. Eliza has. She's fled, and now a posse is being gathered together to track her down. We'll see how far she can get on her pathway to slavery. The longer, just like any type of escape, the longer an individual is away, the better chances they have of success. It's still not a guarantee. They're still on the run, but we're rooting for Eliza. Come on, baby. We can do it. And she's doing this for her young son, Harry. Today we're going to take a bit more serious look at some of this slave dynamic. Oh, some of the blacker, well, listen to the term, the darker, it's sad. Blackness is just so associated with negativity, lack, privation, and white is so pure and clean and everything. But I think you know what I'm talking about. Take a realistic look at murder of blacks in America, and the familiar term we're going to talk about today is lynching. Coming out of Dr. Anderson's Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask, and it's question number 29 in his book, page 93. Blacks didn't lynch whites. So why did whites routinely lynch blacks? Because they're ignorant and stupid. There is no real reason. They listen. If you travel in any Christian circles, at least I was taught, or I understand, that the heart of man is murderous to begin with, all men. Some are able to practice restraint better than others. White men are the worst of the bunch, especially during slavery times. In modern day times, it still occurs. Be it black men being beaten, shot in the back, killed off, just absolutely executed. It still goes on today. It's just with a gun, not so much a rope or burning or castration or things like that. So we're not far removed, and it's white police doing it to black men. We're not that far from lynching, but we'll go in a little bit of the history and then tease out some things, maybe bring it into present day as time permits. He's written extensively on this question. Unfortunately, there's a lot of material we can gather. Part of my issue with lynching is, there's pictures of lynching. We see still pictures of people hung in trees, people burned alive, black people. The two pictures stick out the most. I included a link to Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, and you'll see four black men. Well, it's not in the video. I think it's been extracted, but I'm sure the picture can be found somewhere. It's the internet. Four black men hanging from trees. What a sad night that had been. What a night of terror. What a terror. I want to do some research on those four men. But the picture that figures most prominently in my mind is a little black girl suspended way up in a tree, hung, hands tied behind her back. Her panties are at her ankles. I think she's wearing a white dress. But so much mystery there. There's no known conviction that I know of. Dr. Anderson documents thousands of lynchings over a period of time. I don't. There's no convictions. There's no investigations. You just wake up and you're riding down the street one morning and there's a black person hung up in a tree. Well, you talk about terror. That's pure terrorism. What kind of ghoul ghost is roaming the countryside, snatching black folks and hanging them in trees? Oh, so disgusting. But his concern here is, why don't blacks lynch whites? I'm wondering myself why there's not, to this day, just a big violent black uprising. We're going to talk about it a little bit at the end, but some of it can be traced to conditioning from slavery, religion, things like that. Let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts, though. So lynching, it is a kind of terrorism. Terrorism is just a tool to keep a certain population in fear. The oppressed population knows who's doing it and who's getting away with it, who's not answering for it. The oppressed population knows to restrict their movements and behaviors and things because they could be next for the lynching lottery, things like that. A few interesting facets of lynching as far as frequency. There was a lynching peak after a famous 1896 ruling, Plessy versus Ferguson. It was in regards to having separate rail cars for blacks and whites, the old segregation story. And so that was challenged. The Supreme Court went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court upheld the white concerns to have separate rail cars in there. After this decision, there is an uptick in lynching. After World War I, as black men fought in World War I, fought in every war, blacks. And so after World War I, there's an uptick in lynching. Because the black man's been over there firing weapons, participating, exercising some power. Probably, the military is actually one of the crucibles for integration because on the battlefield, everybody's blood is red. So there's no time to exercise your segregation when lead and bullets and bombs are flying. That is the epitome of ignorance. So you see the military being one of the institutions to forward integration. Not overtly or not quickly by any means, But these black men come up, they've worn suits, they've marched, they've exercised, they've fired weapons, something that's probably extremely restricted to black folks in the early 1900s. All right, so that they come back, and the white man feels a necessary need to put the nigger back in his place through an uptick in lynchings. After the Great Depression, there's an uptick in lynching. And well, what we'll see is, I'll just use those examples out of Dr. Anderson's book. But what you see is it's kind of a letting off of steam, a lot like having a beer after some emotional upheaval. You know, I mean, these white guys, not only, it's letting off steam, it's putting blacks back in their place to a degree. You know, during the Depression, I'm sure many whites found themselves on that horizontal economic plane with black folks and probably didn't like that. And as the economy began to recover and things like that, they needed to separate again. So we'll find those things. You'll find this after race riots. You know, it's anytime it's following some exercise of power. There's this white need to execute and punish blacks for that. It's an interesting phenomenon. It could probably use considerably more time than we have here. Lynching, it's a symbol of white power, entitlement, and whatnot. Lynching was not just hanging folks from trees, but that's how we get it. But it is it could be hanging, probably mostly hanging, but you had people burned alive. Forget which movie it is, where there's a young black man captured, and it's apparently a warm day anyway. And I say that because everybody's pretty dressed for a warm day. It's well, never mind about that, but they got him for some reason. A mob of white men tie him up to a stake, surround him with dry crates, and burn him alive. And this is videotape. This is real. I forget which movie it is. The movie Rosewood shows a lot of black people being burned. I'm sure when some of these cities or communities were sacked, Tulsa, Rosewood, communities in California, and there was probably a lot of burning alive of black people. It wasn't until 2005, as late as 2005, that the Senate, U.S. Senate, issued any apology for lynching. And, blacks need to stop settling for this piecemeal, the way the government, U.S. government, doles out reparations and piecemeal. Reparations actually are a topic, becoming a topic again, and it's cyclical. The reparation debate for getting blacks their just due. As time goes on, the argument gets weaker and weaker, and things like that. But I saw it on CNN mentioned. I saw it was mentioned. I was watching a Bernie, the Bernie guy, Sanders, doing his town hall meeting that was brought up. So we'll hear it again. Dr. Anderson actually he's involved with court cases trying to move that conversation along as well. And this little forum here could be a presentation for that same issue as well. It comes, some of the history, more of the history of lynching. Colonel Charles Lynch really forwarded the practice during the Revolutionary War against British sympathizers. Um, so lynching, it's not a new thing, but it definitely has in America after the Revolutionary War anyway, it does have a focus on black folks. The numbers are in the thousands. Upwards of one at least every 2 days over a period of decades can be found. Um, some reasons. Now here's the thing when I go into reasons for lynching. The reasons are window dressing. White folks are murderously antagonistic to black folks. You know, they don't need a reason to lynch. They don't need a reason to marginalize. That simply are the color of our skin is different. Therefore, we deserve some punishment or oppression or abuse, right? So, you know, any type of behavior, black behavior, almost any type could be considered a lynchable offense. And this is, you know, back to the black codes, Jim Crow, segregation, uh, all these nonsensical reasons for oppressing black folks is kind of the focus here that so these reasons I'm going to give are the same reasons a black person could be jailed for a long time. These reasons can be the same reasons that a black person can be forced into labor or have their land taken or something like that. So the list includes poisoning animals, gambling. Some of these behaviors are behaviors that white folks engage in, you know. But that's probably the biggest offense is practicing a behavior that white folks feel is reserved for them exclusively, you know. So, this lynching was mostly directed at black males. The black male is considered the power of blackness, you know, male potency, you know, phallus, those type of issues are are usually the central thing. So the white man is after to take that through castration, whether it's physically or mentally or socially, things like that. So, you know, a black man could be lynched for touching a white woman, marrying a white woman, asking a white woman to marry, all the interactions that could possibly happen between a black male and a white woman. It didn't go the other way of white males towards black women, you know, because white males felt they were doing black race a favor by laying with black women and such. So those are some of the reasons. What else we got here? I said gambling. Oh, quarreling. I mentioned poisoning animals because, you know, when blacks sometimes had that opportunity, come into power, maybe get a parcel of land finally, get an animal to help them work it. Here comes some jealous white man who may not be doing as well to poison that animal. So the poisoning animals, on the flip side, is more, you know, they are suppressing retaliation um, for that type of behavior. I mean, a black man wakes up and his animals are poisoned. He knows it's no mystery who did it. You know, they didn't want blacks organizing in any way. That made some of the, you know, gathering of wealth and resources even more problematic because, I mean, gathering is it's a very visual event. So, white folks, they're already, we talked about meritorious manumission, those laws that were enacted to um, offer slaves freedom for saving a white life, improving a product or process, uh, things like that. Most importantly, informing on blacks who are trying to organize or organize a group to escape or retaliate, things like that. So, there's always going to be something on the books about blacks organizing, cooperating with one another. That's very problematic for a white uh, established power. They, as long as the blacks are separated in their own individuality, then they'd have no potency. That's the idea. So organizing blacks, uh, it's not surprising to see that on the list. And then you cut the head, the leader out of black organizational discourse, then it scatters the herd, the sheep, so to speak, if you know that type of rhetoric. So those are some of the ways you can a black individual can find themselves lynched, being subject to a mob. Now, back to the original question: why didn't blacks do that, and why wasn't it recorded going the other way? And not just because they were slaves. Blacks don't lack the ability to do anything white folks can do. But the portion of Dr. Anderson's book finishes with the idea that um, some of the resistance for blacks lynching whites could stem from conditioning. It's a kind of conditioning so powerful that blacks could not overcome it. Now there's so he notes white conditioning, of course, from slavery. If you're being beaten and micromanaged, oppressed in that way, not going to be readily available to resist. Also, there is, he mentions participation of black religious leaders who were, remember, black religious leaders were instructed, coached to teach blacks submissiveness, slavery, their place in the Bible, under Jesus, and all that stuff. So that's a part of the conditioning as well. There is a movie. I forget the movie. It's about some of the forerunners of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I forget the man's name. It just came to me during this piece. But he tells this story of his grandfather, I think. And his grandfather took a scythe and cut his master in half. And before this individual's grandfather is hanged, he was asked if he either was sorry that he did it or why he did it or something of that nature. But the answer was that he should have done it. He felt he should have done it sooner. He had just snapped at some point and cut his master in half with a scythe. It's that Grim Reaper looking implement. So interesting story. I have no way to verify it, but just came to mind there in relation to mental conditioning. Okay, so we are at the bottom of our time here. Thanks for sticking with me. We got a lot and a long way to go. That's only day 59 out of the way. We got a whole 365 day, a full year of topics to talk about and to discuss, and we're going to focus more and more, and we'll see what happens. How our thinking has has moved in any way in this year if you stick around long enough. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. That's 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you tomorrow.